Right, guys, the other day I did a video called Is Christa Jacobson Right? And the idea is that our swordsmen, or were swordsmen, better in the Edo period than they were in the Sengoku period. And it's created quite a bit of a chat, and it's been a good chat as well. It's been quite a nice chat. But there's a couple of bits that come up which I not disagree with, but need to expand on. So I'm doing a part 2. So if you like swordsmanship, guys, I'm going to be doing a seminar in America on November the 30th. So click the pinned comment below to see all that. So please do come and have a go at the seminar with me in Richmond, Michigan. But here we go. Let's have a look. Right. So one of the major things, and I'm not saying the people who said this are specifically wrong or anything, but one of the major things that people said was, it depends what you mean by better. So my question is, which was the best option? Which I ain't gonna be honest with you guys, I don't like this avenue. Do you mean technically better? Do you mean like the kata evolved? I'm like, whoa, no, back that up. Which one's harder? Let's rephrase the questions. Which one is a more deadly swordsman? The Sengoku period or the Edo period? Which one will win in a fight? It's not like, well, it depends on what you mean. No, there is no depend. And it's not like, oh, in a duel this and in a duel. I mean, like, there's some samurai. Sometimes they might have to go to war. Sometimes they might be part of a rebellion. They might be an arrest party. Because even in the Edo period, don't think everybody sat around doing nothing. There was arrests. I remember reading a report on arrest of all the doctors in a city because one of the lords had died, so they arrested all the doctors, and then they were cornering people. Then there was another one where messengers were turning up, but they arrested them. And so there's lots of places where you can be. It's not a fair fight. It's not, oh, somebody's armored, somebody's not. You might be in armor, even the Edo period, and you might not be. It was one of those, you're a samurai, you're in the street, you've been trained in war, you've got a sword at your side, there is danger from all over, you may or may not have to wear armour, you may have to fight, it might be a group battle, it might be things. Which one is better at swordsmanship generally? If you took 1,000 warriors from the Sengoku period and 1,000 warriors from the end of the Edo period, and there was a conflict, which two are going to win? Now, and the point is I have no idea, because like Christa Jacobson said, and the Japanese swordsmaster who literally said the same thing as Christa Jacobson, they think that actually the later Edo period swordsmen were better. But there's reason. So one of the things that has been said that are not quite true is, he said, oh, the person in the Sengoku period would have had more experience with the sword. The Sengoku period was not quite like that, guys. It wasn't like everybody went to war. There was wars at certain places, and there was conflicts. And I'm not saying that it was, a time of peace, but in actuality, there was high culture going on. There was pottery going on. There was theatre events. You could go a few years and not do anything. You might go through the entire Sengoku period and not go to war. I don't know. You'd have to track every single battle in the Sengoku period, every single samurai. But the broad statement is most of them engaged in combat and battle, but with guns and bows and arrows and spears, so maybe not swords that much. But obviously we know swordsmanship was a big part of samurai life. But then at the other end, in the end of the Edo period, we know that the samurai have got lackadaisical, they've got bureaucratic stuff, they've got people who really shouldn't be samurai doing jobs. But there's also people who are full-on dojo culture. That's all they do all day, training swordsmanship, studying military classics. And then there's fighting and arrests in Kyoto and town house to house thingy. So which is the better swordsman? Please don't mistake me. Which one is harder? If you dropped him with his kit into a neutral zone and a neutral time, he'd be like, right, here's like a laser tag thingy. You're in the mock buildings, you're in a, here's a town, or here's like you're in a field, or there's a forest. Off you go. Who's going to win? Who's going to be the hardest fighters? So, and the other one that came up was technology and progression. Now, one of the things that most people who have not been trained in history say, and it's a common mistake, it's not a problem if you've said it, it's a common mistake, is that as you go forward in time, technology advances. This is totally inaccurate. It's only because you live today that people think that. Oh, in like 1800s they had horses and carts and like pretty much medieval life, that was it. There was no real medicine or anything. But once you hit those very late 1800s going, we've had 3 or 4 generations of the golden era where less people die, everything progresses, and we go on and that. But for all of medieval life, that is not the case. The Romans were far more sophisticated than the Celts, even though there's debatable, because they were far more what's the word? They know that the Celts and then into the Iron Age and everything and the Dark Ages still had an intricate system, but there's no record of it. But we know you can't really take it away. The Romans were pretty organised, and then it fell away. And you get, once Rome comes out of Britain, Britain collapses. You get the Bronze Age collapse. You get, basically, if history teaches you anything, it is that society will collapse and you'll have to deal with it, and there'll be starvation and murder, and you're going to have to live with that at some point. Some generation will have to deal with it. So the idea that another swords got better, I am not by any means, and I'm not being like, oh, humble me. I've genuinely, be honest with you guys, I've never really been interested in the history of Japanese swords. It's a bit boring subject. Like, you get to get a book on it, you're like, oh my god. You watch a documentary, like, Jesus Christ, someone wake me up. You know, it's just like, but I've heard that actually swords were better in the 1400s, but I need some comments below for this, and that actually, technologically speaking, they were not that good at the end of the Edo period compared to the ones at the beginning. Is that a myth? They were better back in the past? We don't know. Also, guns declined. We know that the Japanese were hot on in guns, but literally the rest of the world carried on. The Japanese sort of retarded and went backwards. And so you've got that, and the idea that people get technically better. No, that's not true. You have to remember, guys, that without the edge of war testing you, people will not get better. They don't get better. And another one that I've come across is that as time goes on, people get stronger and athletes are better. That is when you're trapped in today. Athletes have progressively got better over the last 50 decades with nutrition. You know, like breaking the 4-minute mile, it's now well under 4-minute mile. The sort of like the 100-meter dash is well under 10 seconds, where it used to be 10 seconds. So we know we're shaving that off. But that is not the case in medieval life. It wasn't the case that the Sengoku period was less hardy than the Edo period person. In truth, it's probably the opposite way around, where you're going to get a hardier person earlier on. So don't fall for that common misunderstanding that things get better as things go on, and technology. That is a misconception from the 20th to 21st century, because in all of history, nobody has ever done what we have done, which is this, talking to each other across the world on this sort of stuff. And we're probably, and this is what's the main bit, the general public is less healthy now than it probably was in medieval period. The thing about, I went to live with an African village, who lived a medieval lifestyle. There was no electricity, there was a well for the water, and there was no medicine. Yep, and you know what? They were the fittest, healthiest people I've ever seen, because everyone who wasn't fit and wasn't healthy was dead. They were just dead, and they weren't any getting away. They had a high death rate, but those who survived enjoyed. One of them was 90, and it was 90, all his teeth are falling. I was like, yeah, he remembers the British here and all that. You get hardy people in medieval times. What you don't get is, you don't get like amputees are problematic, or people if you broke bones and it's sort of they've set wrong. So don't think we do know in the medieval period that people would have been, maybe there's more people with a certain disease that's left them scarred, but if they don't die, you know, they're going to be, as long as society keeps them there. But on the whole, medieval life weeds out the weak, and it's always been a sort of one of those things of mine where everybody goes, oh, in medieval period they're all ill and they go around with no teeth and they're like eating mud, and you know, it's like, come on, these guys, if you just go back and look at some of European art in the 1500s, you'll see what I mean. But anyway, I'm digressing. So what do I mean by the best, who's the best swordsman, the one who's going to win? He's got the best combat skills, he's the hardest, he's, you know, got more skills, he would outwit the other person in a sword fight. I'm not saying you pull a Sengoku period war and he's shooting everyone and he's like got his spear and his bow. They both got swords and they're like, there's a group and you got to fight. Who is the far more skilled? So it's the same as Viking versus 19th or 18th century fencer. Who would win? Everybody go, oh, the Vikings, tall, strong. Actually, Vikings are about 5'8" or something like that, and probably a Spanish rapier fighter from the 16, 17, 1800s would be far better than a Viking, and probably kill him outright. You know what I mean? Even though it's like we all got this bearded, yeah, that's cool, but one-on-one in a duel, probably the rapier would win. even though we don't want that to happen. But probably if it was mass combat, the Vikings would be like, burn everything down, you know, let's kill everything, like take their heads. You know, it's one of those. So you got to be careful because you get into the sort of like samurai versus Viking. We don't want to do that. We're talking about samurai v samurai in their native land, in their environment, and which group would win. Edo period, Sengoku period. And the other last thing I want to leave you with is the one thing that really pecks my head is when people go, oh, Sengoku period is all armor fighting and Edo period is all unarmored fighting. It's like, no, it's not. So if you actually think about it and stop and think about it for a minute, 99% of swordsmanship, and I'm using 99 to just mean a lot, of the swordsmanship in the Sengoku period must have been unarmored, because you're in a time of conflict, but you got to remember they're not in war all the time. They go to war periodically. Maybe Sengoku Studies has got something on this. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not going to put him in a corner to try and find something. Once a year, every 6 months, every 4 years, you're going to be getting your arm going to war. But you've got to walk around a dangerous medieval place, and it's far freer to walk around in the Sengoku period than in the Edo period. The Edo period, it's locked everyone with gates, and it was controlled. The Sengoku period was much easier to walk around. So your chances of getting jumped in Japan for sword versus sword unarmored is probably the Sengoku period. But everybody says, oh, Sengoku period's got to be armor. Not really. And then they say Edo period has got to be non-armored. But not really. They still did learn those sort of stuff. But most likely, and again, I'm going from no proof, but just logic, most swordsmanship is going to be unarmored in both periods. Because when you're armored, you're dealing with guns, bows and arrows, catapults, horses, charges, lances, fire technology, fire techniques, terrain, rocks, slings. You probably are not focusing on swords. Swords are your sidearms. This is I'm in the street, I need to defend myself. But they're not going to take their swords off for war. Swords are still used in war. But most likely, it's like this. Your sword is your gun at your hip for you Americans, yeah? It's your gun at the hip. And you're just walking around your day. You're not in your battle gear with your army battle gear and your laser eye camera and your big M16 or whatever you've got nowadays, and somebody's got a bazooka. That's war. But you've got your handgun, your fatigues on, and you've got a cap on, and that's you walking around. That's a samurai with his sword. Whereas the full get-up and the tank, that's the samurai with his horse, his spears, his bows, his arrows. They're the difference. So when people say, oh, Sengoku period was all armoured, nobody in war just walked around all the time in all the gear with a tank. Where are you going? They're going to shop. Oh, bring the tank. It isn't like that. So what do you guys think? So I wanted to just clear this up because there was a lot of comments that were great comments, but I thought, no, you're going the wrong way here. So anyway, there you go, guys. Right, and many people said the same comments, so if I'm not specifically talking about you, it's the same comments. Get yourself a copy of Book of Bushido, The Book of Ninja, How to Be a Modern Samurai. There'll be 3 books in that series, guys, by the end. 3 books in that series. The next one is on its way, but I'm writing it now, which means it's going to be at least a year away. So it'll be next November it's out, I think. So enjoy that. Right, beyond that, pinned link for training with me in America.